Last year, we passed Senate Bill 1303, and we had a very emotional floor debate on that. And quite frankly, bluntly, we had some of the exact same points being made against that piece of legislation. And I am convinced, I'm convinced that if we defeated this legislation, we will be back here next year having a debate all over again on the latest variant, the Zeta variant, whatever you want to call it. This argument will never go away. And the reason why we passed the bill last year, which, by the way, it did usurp the authority of our school boards, you're darn right it did, was because we were in a crisis. And we're now still in a crisis, but it's a different kind of crisis. It's a crisis in which every school board has been thrown into a situation where they are now caught up in literally a warfare without any guidance from the state, because our previous governor just handed down an executive order with no metrics. And now our new governor handed down an executive order simply ordering the mask mandate to go away. And so it's going to come out of our body, just like it did last year, organically. We're going to come up with a solution. And yes, I realize it's happening right here on the floor, but you know what? That's how it happens, folks. Welcome to show business. And so let me talk a little bit about some of the points that have been raised, because these are legitimate points. And I want to go directly to the issue of the science, because I will tell you, I have read every single article I could find over the past few weeks about this issue. And the best one I found was the one I offered to hand out on the Senate floor a week ago, which was the January 26th article from The Atlantic magazine. Not Rolling Stone, not the National Review, The Atlantic magazine, which comprehensively went through all of the masking studies and frankly dismantled all of them and said there was no evidence that masking actually made a difference for children in their health outcomes or in community health outcomes. Now, I offered that article around to people. Some people took it, most people did not. But I have yet to see a single person on the floor of the Senate attempt to rebut the conclusions that were made. And I've talked to the epidemiologist who wrote that article. She would offer to come down if people would listen to her. I don't think you'd want to, because it may not conform to your views. But let's talk about the real world data, because you may not be a doctor, and I'm certainly not a doctor, but I know how to read numbers. We've had states since the summer of 2021, let's just go with 2021, that have been allowing children to attend schools without a mandate. Large states with millions of people, millions of school children. Texas, Florida, Ohio, in some cases similar demographics to Virginia. And I have been waiting for someone to come forward with the statistics showing that they have a higher rate of community transmission or a higher rate of youth mortality. And you know what? Those statistics don't exist because, frankly, the numbers are indistinguishable. We have the comparative data, folks. It's indistinguishable. So that's the science, that the states which have had no mask mandate have had no health sanction or community outbreaks any differently than Virginia has. Frankly, the state with the highest COVID mortality has been New York, which has had one of the strictest regimes. And I'm not blaming that. I'm just saying there's just no correlation statistically. Now, let's move on to school boards, because I am so sympathetic to school boards. And by the way, I had a text from the chair of the Prince William County School Board, who, by the way, is an ophthalmologist and is furious at me for my last bill, like my colleague over there. But he basically made the point, look, we're not built for this type of debate. We're not built for this type of high-energy partisan warfare. We just want to educate kids. And I'm not saying this is the consensus opinion. It's not. But I can tell you there are people in Northern Virginia who would like for us to end this now. Now, it's not a popular position to be against masks. It's popular to be for masks. And there's obviously an overlap politically between blue counties and a consensus for masking, which leads me to my next point. The First Amendment of the United States Constitution gives us all the right to express ourselves, and it limits public schools in limiting expression. And when you force a child to wear a mask without any scientific basis for doing that, you're forcing them to adopt a statement that they or their family may not believe in. Now, again, if there's scientific data to back it up, that's one thing. But if there's no scientific data and you're just saying, no, wear the mask because that's what the community wants, that's a violation of the First Amendment, folks. There used to be something called the ACLU in this state, okay? So some of us need to just take a look at these civil liberty issues. That's my concern. I appreciate what Senator Marsden said, that kids are going to get picked on and there's going to be mask versus no mask and debates. But the problem is, if you follow that theory, then you have to ban masks altogether unless you require everybody to wear one. It's like, you know, it becomes a bipolar world, and I don't think that's the answer either, because I do think parents have the right to protect family members. I do. I don't think cloth masks have any value, but you know what? That's not my choice to make for somebody else's family. Let me move on to a couple other points. CDC. You know, the CDC is a federal agency, and look, I get it. You love it when they're in your corner, and when they're not, they're a pain. But I will say that the CDC, to say they've been a little bit sluggish in changing their recommendations would be the understatement of the millennium. Don't forget, up till a few weeks ago, if you were exposed to somebody that had COVID, you were supposed to spend 14 days in quarantine. Guess what, folks? We wouldn't be even in this room right now. We'd all be home. So obviously we didn't take that seriously. So we tend to pick and choose what we take seriously from the CDC. I don't have a doctorate in medicine, but I do have a doctorate in common sense. And I will tell you that if you look at the statistics and they're telling you that there's no variation between communities with mask mandates and communities without mask mandates, that the mask mandate is not protecting people's lives. Now, let me move on to one more point about emergencies. I know my colleague is going to talk to emergencies. Nothing in this bill will change the governor's authority under Title 44. I litigated that before the Supreme Court, and I lost, okay? Talk to the loser. The governor has untrammeled ability to declare a state of emergency and suspend all state laws, period, full stop. Nothing in this law will change that. If somebody wants an enactment clause at some point down the road, we can deal with that, but frankly, it would be a gratuity. Nothing will change that. Now, let me get to the last point. Let me talk about kids. I made a speech in front of the Virginia Chamber of Commerce about 2 months ago in which I said we have treated our children as second-class citizens over the past 2 years. I was wrong. We've treated them as third-class citizens. We have taken actions against our children. We've closed schools. We've shut down sports. We've canceled activities. We've forced them to wear masks for 6 to 8 hours on end without a break, without any evidence that it's actually beneficial to their health. Can you imagine if we did that to our pets? We'd have protesters out the building. I wouldn't be able to schedule enough hearings in the Ag Committee. But we do it to our kids, and therefore it's okay. Well, you know what? It's not okay. You know, as I said, there's only 2 things I take seriously in this life, one being a dad, the other one being a business owner. And one thing I've learned is childhood is a moment. I mean, you turn around and it's gone, and a child grows up. And when a child has lost 2 years to this, not based on science, I'm sorry, but based on somebody's construction of science, which frankly is drifting away, that's a tragedy. And we can end that tragedy. We have the ability to end it. Now, again, this is not, I don't think, going to be the final vote on this bill during this session. Maybe it will. But I will say this. We are going to resolve the mask wars during this session. They're going to be over. We're not going to come back and deal with them anymore. We're going to resolve them. It's going to happen on this body. I hope you will join me in voting for this bill. Thank you.
As I was about to say, I think it's worth me taking a minute to say a few things that I feel very strongly about, because I believe that this is the most important bill that we will debate in this legislative session. And I know we're here to work on the budget, and we're here to deal with a lot of very weighty issues that matter to Virginians. But I can assure you that of the people who are communicating with me now, this is the #1 issue that they care about. This is what they're calling my office about. This is what they're emailing about. This is what they're texting about. This is what the parent text threads and group chats are all about. And I would ask the members of this body to think about it. When will it end? If we continue the conversation and continue to make this a political discussion in this chamber and in the other chamber and wait until every single person is satisfied with every single scientific fact, how much longer will that take? And that's all our families and our parents are saying. And much of what I was going to comment on has already been said, probably far more eloquently than I could say, by the senior senator from Richmond City. when she talked very wisely about how this is tearing communities apart and how we have politicized an issue that should never have been political. Healthcare isn't political. Keeping each other safe isn't political. And certainly, how it is that we come up with this off-ramp shouldn't be political. It should be practical, and it should be common sense. And I applaud the two patrons of this bill for bringing common sense to the legislature and attempting to depoliticize and de-weaponize something that has been the most disruptive thing in my children's life, in my family's life, and in the families of the kids in our schools, our public and our private schools. And I will tell you, to quote the senior senator from Richmond City, she said, it's about political points to tear communities apart. And you know what we're doing right now? We're standing here in this body making political points, talking about tearing communities apart, talking about, well, you're going to pit one kid against another kid. Well, I got news for you. You know what's happening right now? There are families who have one kid going to one school where they're required to mask, and they have an older sibling going to another school where they're not. And talk about pitting each other against each other. Kids are super, super mad about that, and their parents are even more upset. And so while we stand here and we pass judgment on something that is brought to you here in a bipartisan way, based on science and based on common sense, and yes, read the Atlantic article if you have any doubt. We stand here having this discussion, and yet 3 Democratic governors have just come out and said, okay, we're repealing the mask mandate. And we're not standing up here excoriating them and saying that they're outrageous and it's irresponsible and that the governor of Delaware and the governor of Connecticut and the governor of New Jersey are just unbelievably irresponsible in putting all the citizens in those 3 states at risk. We're not saying that. And the reason that we're not is because we're standing here in this chamber trying to politicize something that I can tell you that if you had the opportunity to let parents come and plead with you and listen to what they say about the toll it's taken on their children, how it's affected them and their mental health, and when they go home and have fun weekends and spend weekends with other families and play outside and do all these things in the world, and yes, go shopping and do everything that they do without a mask on, and then come back to school on Monday morning, and suddenly they're in this very unpleasant, sanitized, masked environment where suddenly the pandemic hits them right square in the head. That's a really unpleasant way to go to school. It has made my children, who used to love going to school on Mondays, used to cry when I picked them up from late gates and said, can I please stay longer? It has made them hate their time in school. And I've heard people say, oh, kids, it's masks. They don't care that much. They care. And you know what? Parents were really good about it. We were all really good about it. And we were super compliant because we cared about our colleagues. We cared about our families. We cared about our friends who were immunosuppressed. And we cared about people who were fragile. And we were super, super respectful. And our families have done that. Our teachers have done that. Our superintendents have done that. But you know what they're saying now? And it might not be politically popular in every community to say it. So lots of them are saying it very quietly. But they're saying it. And they're saying it to anybody who will listen, whom they think will sympathize. And what they're saying is, please, 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 just give us an off-ramp. Just let it end. So if you can think of a better solution to do what the governors in Delaware and Connecticut and New Jersey have done and solve this problem, then it would be solved. But absent that, I don't know what other choice we have but to pass legislation like this that is actually commonsensical. And I would never vote for something that I didn't believe was supported by science, that I thought put my community at risk, put my children at risk, put their teachers at risk. I would not do that. But I can tell you that we're now 3 years into this, and I'm not certain that we see any light at the end of the tunnel on COVID. It will mutate. It will be around. And I don't want to be here or be watching this body 5 years from now standing here talking about, again, how are we going to manage this issue? So I would just urge the members of the body to please support this bill. And I know that it doesn't change anybody's mind likely, but it's worth me standing here and begging if it will change one mind, because I promise you the families that you represent are so eager for you to do this for them.
I would say that the most egregious politicization of this situation is the message that we've gotten from supposedly trusted experts that have created the kind of anxiety that results in the conflicts we see today. And that is the suggestion that if you don't wear your mask, you harm me. I must therefore control you. No. Not only is that not accurate scientifically, it's un-American. I decide for myself. I look at the risks. I never, ever tell a patient what medical decision they should make. I tell them the positives and the negatives of each of their alternatives, and they decide, and we should not, as political bodies, be deciding for individuals in Virginia where there is no evidence to show that these obtrusive interventions that actually harm children should be perpetuated. You're on the wrong side of this if you vote against this bill. And I will conclude with that, and I hope that we will pass this bill and move it forward to the House for a quick action. Thank you, Madam President.
The question is, shall Senate Bill 739 pass? All those in favor of passage will record their votes aye. Those opposed, no. Are the senators ready to vote? Have all the senators voted? Does any senator desire to change their vote? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 21, noes 17.
Ayes 21, noes 17. The bill passes.